Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome. It's Tuesday, September 10th, 2024, and I'm calling our meeting to order at 6:30 p.m., our Committee of the Whole. So we're going to start with a moment of silent reflection. And before we do that, I want to just note that today is World Suicide Prevention Day, a worldwide commitment and action to prevent suicides in Canada and around the world. In Canada, 4,500 people die by suicide every year. That is the equivalent of about 12 people a day. Another 200 a day attempt suicide. The highest risk groups in Canada are men and boys, members of First Nations and Métis communities. So as we enter into the moment of silent reflection, please let us reflect on this day. Thank you. Moving on to our land acknowledgement. The municipality of Port Hope exists on the lands of the Mississauga Anishinaabeg traditional territory covered by the Williams Treaties. We honor and recognize First Peoples as rights holders and stewards of the lands and waters on which we have the privilege to live, work, and play, including the Ganaraska Forest and River. We pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging. We commit to actions towards truth and reconciliation by recognizing the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, strengthening ties with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, especially those who make their home in Port Hope, and learning from Indigenous ways of knowing and being. We do so by recognizing the past and working towards a shared future. Moving on to item number 2, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? I note that none were received prior to tonight's meeting. Seeing none around the table, we'll move on to item number 3, correspondence, beginning with 3.1, Task Force on Housing and Homelessness meeting minutes of July 18th, 2024, and the Deputy Mayor will introduce the matter.
They were just elevated for informational purposes, which was something that Council agreed we would do to keep Council informed of the ongoing deliberations.
Thank you for that. Is there anything that you would like to highlight from the minutes?
Yeah, I mean, I think I encourage people to read them. It was a really interesting meeting. We did meet with a number of organizations that are part of the sort of social services ecosystem, working around with homeless residents and looking at housing issues and understanding sort of the role that they play within that ecosystem and some of the gaps and opportunities that they see. So it's an interesting read if you're interested in that subject.
Thank you for that. And moving on to the second correspondence, which is 3.2, Ontario, the recommended motion is, of course, to receive this for information. So can I get a moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Todd, all in favor? Thank you. Moving on to item number 3.2, Ontario's Community Legal Clinics joint letter re-evicting residents of homeless encampments in Ontario, and the Deputy Mayor will introduce the matter.
Yes, thank you. I received this from the Help and Legal Center because it had been intended that it was a letter that would be circulated to all Ontario municipalities, but there appears to have been an administrative mistake. I don't know. It didn't reach everyone. We're not alone, so they just simply asked that I share it, and that and they did ask that I elevate it as well, so that all members of the public could be aware of some of the legal constraints that municipalities must sort of abide by when we're responding to growing numbers of people sleeping rough in our communities and potential encampments as they move into communities that aren't used to having to confront with visible homelessness in this way.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions on this? Okay, so We're going to move to receive this item for information. Can I get a mover and seconder? Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Darrell. All in favor? Thank you, and that is passed unanimously. Moving on then to item number 4, items for consideration, starting with 4.1, PowerPoint presentation by our Director David Baxter, Finance, regarding Municipality of Port Hope property tax policies. So, welcome.
Thank you. And with the fall and leading up to our budget, we are back looking at our budget roadmap. You may recall that before the summer, I was here talking about county specific tax policies. For those who are unaware, the province sets out the legislation for property taxes. A lot of the policy related decisions are made at the county level and would apply to all member municipalities. And then there are some areas where we have complementary or some specific decisions that we can make here locally. So perhaps it's been good, since it's an exciting topic, that you've had the summer to recover from talking about the county tax policies. And so tonight I'm going to speak to the ones that the Port Hope Council actually passes. So I'll point out we have one that is legislatively required, which is our annual tax levy, which I'll speak to in a minute, and 5 which are optional. I'm going to go through those 6. And then at the end of that, I'll talk about some more tax incentive type programs that we have here. And then just a bit of a reminder about the county related bylaws, just so you can kind of, think about them all together. So the one you're all familiar with is the annual bylaw, which sets our tax rates and then provides for us to collect, to charge and collect taxes for the county education and municipal purposes. We do identify separate tax rates for each property class, but that is very much based on the county established tax ratios and tax rate reductions for each property subclass. It also implements special services and therefore establishes common and special service tax rates, which I'll be talking about. There is an additional separate rate for the Port Hope Heritage Business Improvement Area, or HBIA, as established by the board. And I do want to note that while we establish that as part of the tax levy, it is only charged to commercial properties within that defined area. Also, just interesting part, the HBIA ones are set up a little bit differently. They actually have a max and a minimum set up, something hopefully we'll actually move away from, but theirs is a little bit different in that way. Then we reduce the final tax bill by any interim levy, which I'll be speaking to in a minute. The tax bills are to be sent out 21 days in advance of the due date. We impose penalty charge for the non-payment at the beginning of the month following the due date. And then we impose interest charges every month thereafter for any outstanding tax arrears. There is no penalty or interest that's compounded, right? So when you miss another payment, we're not charging you interest on interest, okay? But the provincial legislation does identify, and it kind of goes hand in hand with that, is that when you make a payment, it first gets applied to penalty and interest on your account, okay? Not the part that isn't collecting interest on. This also provides for the treasurer to add any charges, fees, or otherwise any amounts due to the municipality or the upper tier as authorized in provincial legislation. And this typically is, related to services or something pertaining to the property. So if someone has water or wastewater arrears, those can actually be moved to the tax roll. Same as if there's any property standards related issues. So those charges then can be added to the tax roll, tax sale costs, that type of thing. So that does happen, and this bylaw kind of confirms the provincial framework for that. All right, so that is the annual tax levy, or we usually refer to as more your final levy. We also, so this is optional, but very, very, very common, because by the time we get all the, pass the budget, get the tax rates from the county, get the tax rates from the province, a good part of the year has gone by, right? And so we typically would be sending out final tax bills at the end of May, June, or early June, due at the end of June. You can imagine that we need funds to be able to run the municipality before the end of June, right? And so the provincial legislation allows the municipality to have an interim tax levy, which effectively is up to 50% of what you were billed last year, right? If you say you had a vacant lot and then built your house in the middle of the year, and so there was an increase, that would all be annualized for this purpose. But effectively, when people are paying their interim tax levy, they're paying half of the same rate as they paid last year. Okay. These are also in two installment due dates. And I just note, whether it's the 2 installment due dates on the interim or on the final, typically these are due on the third last business day of the month. And that's based on taxpayer feedback about when they get payments from different support programs. It also allows us for it to be on the third last business day, so that if you came in, if it was due on a Wednesday, right, and you came at 5 o'clock or forgot or whatever else, and then you come in on Thursday morning, we haven't yet applied penalty to your account. So it also kind of allows people to have 2 additional grace days before, you say, on the following Monday, if that was the first of the month, when we would actually be applying the penalty. Okay, so that's kind of how it's structured. We moved it a few days earlier or later, but feedback that we've had from our constituents is that works out the best, so that they have any support payments at that point in time, and provides them a little opportunity to get that in. Okay. All right. So moving on from just the basic tax levy policies, we have a policy established in 2014 and updated in 2017 that establishes special services. And the provincial framework around sharing or allocating out taxes within a municipality is that essentially by default, all services are considered to be common services. And if there are services, specific services, right, that occur in a designated benefiting area, then you can set up some special services. And so the municipality over the years has done quite a bit of work through this. And currently, we have 3 special services set up. So we have, for policing, we have the OPP, which services the rural area, so that is charged only to the rural area. And the Port Hope Police Service, which services the urban area, that is charged only to the urban area. We have transit, including conventional and specialty transit, that is charged only to the urban area. And then Christmas tree pickup, which is charged only to the urban area. And I do note that like we take any levy we have and then we charge that out over the weighted assessment, which takes into account the different property tax ratios or the rates different types of properties would be charged. We do that same process. It's just, instead of taking that levy and allocating it over the entire municipality, we take that levy and we allocate it out either over the rural area or through the urban area, but it's all on the same basis, just a different grouping. Okay. We have municipal housing facilities, and this one really is complementary to the county's municipal housing facilities policy that I spoke about last time. So the county is the service manager for housing and is authorized to operate and manage housing, as well as establish, fund, administer programs for the provision of residential accommodation in the service area of which we are a part of. They go through the process of making sure they meet a threshold of affordability for low and moderate income households. And the program is designed to do one of two things: either support the development of affordable housing or preserve and improve the affordability of housing. Agreements shall not be less than 20 years, and municipal housing facilities shall be subject to property taxes at a rate equal to or lower than the rate applied to a single family residential property. So this aligns with the county bylaw, and effectively what happens, as you see when we go through the budget, you'll see there's different write-offs. And so we through the normal course, if there's a multi-residential property, we are required to charge them at the multi-residential tax rate. And then this bylaw, this framework, then means we turn around and we charge them at the multi-res rate, and then we effectively turn around and give them a rebate or a refund or a grant to reduce them to the level that it would have paid if it was at the residential rate, which is lower. Okay. This we apply a little over $10,000 a year for. So it is something that the municipality does in support of affordable housing, but that doesn't exactly come to you every year. You know what I mean? And you're voting and you're seeing it every year, but it is something that the municipality is doing and is included in our budget every year. We have probably the oldest bylaw that I've been involved with is Municipal Bylaw 2295, which exempts land belonging to and invested in the Navy League of Canada from property taxes other than school taxes and local improvement rates. And it does specify that the land must be occupied and solely used for the purpose of carrying out their activities. So obviously they couldn't get this tax treatment and then rent, sublease out the space. And finally, we have a bylaw that provides for a penalty and interest exemption for farms, kind of effectively delaying the due date till October 31st of a current year for farm properties. So farm properties must meet the designated farm assessment class, so they have to be classed as farm. The farm property taxes, including arrears and penalty and interest, must be paid in full for the prior year. And as of the beginning of November, they would be then subject to the normal penalty and interest program. And there are some exclusions to the program, really about it limiting it to actual farms. So if you have farm and residential and some commercial, that all doesn't apply, right? If you have farm and then you build something, in the middle of the year that isn't strictly farm, that doesn't also get the specific tax treatment. So it's very specific to a farm, the farm part of the property. So then we have some tax-related incentive programs. We have one for a brownfield heritage property tax incentive program and one for a heritage tax incentive program. Both of these have effectively been replaced by our community improvement plan. That's where we see, the activity kind of to those ends, mainly for the tax increment grant program and the Brownfields Tax Assistance program. So all of these programs, I'm not going to get into all of them. They're not as widely used, but they're all predicated on, you made a change to the property, something that we're trying to incentivize. There has now been a subsequent increase in your property taxes, right? And providing a reduction, kind of a phased, or supported approach to assist you in the increase in your property tax. Okay. Now I will note, really going through these, Admittedly, some of these, are old, they've been amended, time permitting, we'd like to go through and review them. I know the one for the delay for the farm one, I really have to go in and look at that. It kind of talks about, delaying the due dates, but it doesn't actually delay the due dates. It does it in a different mechanism in terms of exemptions for penalty and interest. Really need to kind of look into that, something that should be revisited. I've also asked, I'm not aware, this is not something that's broadly done, so it's not something that I'm aware of, other municipalities doing. So it's one that needs to be reconsidered. The Brownfield Heritage Property, program from 2005, it's never been used in the time that I have been here. And certainly it's been different work under different, programs or different situations. And then the Heritage Tax Incentive Program used to be more utilized. And then we've, with the CIP program, it's newer. There's a package of a bunch of different options, but it is specific that you don't come in and get both programs, right? So people are now utilizing the community improvement program. So some changes, to be, made. We don't, sometimes we don't go and overly publicize because they do need to be revisited, and we need to rethink them or remove some of them, quite frankly. But this is kind of our current slate that we have. And, certainly, yes, there's more. Just a quick reminder in terms of the county. These are the ones that I spoke to previously. So they have a bylaw to actually set the tax ratios. They have a bylaw to establish their rates. They're the ones who have a bylaw around tax relief for low-income seniors and persons with disabilities. That one, Mayor, you had asked me to speak to briefly. So that one does, it is specific to low-income seniors, so someone who's getting guaranteed income support or Ontario Works over the age of 65, or someone with persons with disabilities. In both cases, it's about the incremental increase in your property taxes for the year up to $500. Okay, would effectively be rebated, through the program. And then there's one for eligible charity tax rebates, which we do have several charities that participate in that. It's like many things. It's a county policy, but administered, through our tax and revenue team here. That's who they apply to in the process. And then, as I spoke to, there's municipal housing facilities one, and then a small scale on-farm business subclass that the county has established. So between the two, that should give you a broad awareness of the bylaws and the policies that we have around how we run the property tax regime.
Thank you very much. I'm sure there's questions and comments from council. Council Clare. Deputy Mayor.
That's okay. Thank you, Director Baxter. I actually just wanted to pick up, thanks for explaining a little bit about the tax relief for low-income seniors and persons with disabilities. I think that's a topic of conversation I've had with a number of members of council. Curious, could you speak to how residents can learn more about that to determine if they're eligible and how they might make a request for consideration under that program?
Sure. So we have a form for it. I believe there's information on our website. Once the county had updated, the county, it's a county program, so I would think they would as well. But like anything really tax related, I'm happy for if someone's interested. And we do have people. We've had people come in before and just say, hey, is there any options? Here's kind of my situation. Is there anything that applies to me? So we're really happy to have those conversations. And go through it. I will be honest, sometimes, there's people who come in and want that, but they don't actually meet, the criteria, right? But, that's the program is really set up, aligned to the provincial legislation. And, we're happy to have, those conversations. Our customer service staff or any of our staff would be happy to have that. So if someone is pursuing it, there is an application then for the person that would go and they would, fill that out. and then we go from there. But each member municipality, it's a consistent form that was developed throughout the county. So like each member municipality, essentially has the same form. And there are obviously, I mean, I gave it a very high level, version of it. Your property, needs to be, within, I think, the median property value, to be eligible, and other things you can't,
Thank you, Director. I'm going to just, if you don't mind, just follow up on something off this question. So the program that the county currently has in place, can you tell us when it was developed and established? And under current provincial legislation, is that the only kind of program that can be delivered for any kind of tax relief? Because it seems to me that, although I appreciate the subpopulation that it is targeting, that there's certainly concerns from seniors that are living below a certain income line that may not necessarily fit neatly into the parameters of this existing program. So question, when it was established, is there any wiggle room there? And thirdly, if we wanted to see any changes, if there is room for something else, that would be an issue then that would need to be brought to county?
That is correct. So previously, if memory serves me, it was this program was more set up as more of a deferral type loan. So if you were in a position, right, they would, I can't remember, it's been a while, what the actual amount was that you'd be eligible for, but effectively it would stay on there as a loan, against the property, but just wouldn't become due at that time. And then eventually, when someone sold the property, then it would be paid at that time. So this has actually been, in some ways, an improvement, because there wasn't, probably a bit of a disincentive in terms of you still owe the money, you know what I mean? It's just establishing a loan against the property. So this, under this program, which was established in 2021, was when this was updated by the county, does actually provide, for that, the potential for that annual rebate of up to $500. But yeah, it's a county policy. So, and it's really the only tool that I can think of, that at the municipal level, that we would be able to, apply. And certainly, there's other support programs, for higher levels of government. But, for us, in terms of, someone walks into the tax office, for us to be able to talk to them about that we can apply, this is really the program, and any changes for it would be made at the county level.
Thanks. I have two more questions, but I'm going to turn it over to Councillor Mink and then flip back.
Thank you. So it's on the same topic. So to the chair, when you say two small questions, when you say up to 500, is that taken off of the lower tier, or is it prorated across both? And well, I'll let you answer that first.
That is a good question. Typically, it impacts county and municipal, and I think it's $500 combined. I'd have to go back and actually read the policy. But I do think it ties in both. I can't remember, it might even tie in the education. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But I do think even combined, I think it's $500.
Okay, thank you. And the other question, sort of going off the last comment, the mayor asked, or no, I think you yourself said that there's other rebates at other levels. And I know that at MPAC, for instance, you could apply for environmental EP lands rebates, as well as if you're renting your land to a farmer and so on. Is there a consolidated place somewhere where ratepayers can come in and find out all the opportunities that they could search on their own, or do they kind of have to go out there and fish around and see what there is?
I mean, we have really listed the ones that we would administer, and then a reference to, to MPAC, in terms of, the different, setups and different programs that they have. Like MPAC has quite a bit of information on their website, so you can imagine, and most of it doesn't pertain to, say the typical property owner. I'm not aware of a one-stop shop for, all the things that, might potentially, impact you, right? Like if you, in terms of your income taxes and stuff, there's opportunity from an accessibility standpoint. You need to make some improvements, and there's other things that potentially are related to your property or property taxes as well at other levels of government. I'm not aware of any municipality we could even go and mirror that from that would have that kind of an exhausted list or a location. But if anyone is aware of one, I'd be quite interested. We do our best, though, if someone comes in and can describe their situation, to look at what opportunities are available and to see if there's any way we can assist them.
Okay, I'm going to just flip back. I've got just a few quick questions. Can you tell us what proportion of county educational taxes the municipality of Port Hope pays? Or is that something that we could actually find out?
So everyone within the county pays the same tax rate. Yeah, in terms of the proportion of the education, because the other part is that the school boards aren't specific to the county. Do you know what I mean? Geographically either. So I feel like we might be able to, I need to understand kind of what specifically you're in and getting at to be able to understand whether we'd be able to.
I can follow up because there's a specific reason I'm asking that, but we can probably follow up. A couple other questions. Is the county the only entity that can support the development of affordable housing under our current bylaw scheme? And also, could you let us know what is currently available in the CIP?
I know we have money in the CIP. I don't know off the top of my head how much. And as far as for the affordability, housing affordability, so that's led by the county, right? We have a bylaw that mirrors it. And then because we apply the rebates to the taxes, so we would actually apply that reduction. And then also for the county's part, and then deduct that from, eventually we just deduct that from the amount we're remitting to the county. But effectively we're both paying in or financially contributing to the program, but it's the county's program.
Any other questions or comments on this presentation? Okay, so the recommended action is that we receive this for information. Can I get a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Todd, seconded by Councillor Mink. All in favor? And that is passed unanimously. So you're not going anywhere, Director, because we're moving on to report 4.2 FS 12 2024 re 2025 special services review. So I'm going to ask if there's anything further that you would like to add before council considers this report.
So I can certainly speak to the report, and then if I've got any questions, I may move over to my laptop if that's assistive. So effectively, as we've been noting for several years, and council has understandably had the want to wait until the tax allocation phasing has been complete. We are identifying or have a recommendation to remove specialty transit and Christmas tree pickup as special services. This will do a few things. It will simplify the tax allocation, which, as you're aware, is typically a challenging concept and is more nuanced in Port Hope than I would suggest most municipalities. So this will help that. It will enable us to focus more on our financially material services as special services, and to address the inconsistency that's been arising in our established special services for tax allocation purposes over the past few years. This would have a net impact to the typical residential taxpayer based on 2024 numbers. It would be an increase in the rural area of just over $16. And a decrease just over $6 in the urban area. We'd also suggest, and we know we're about to go into the budget and look at different, what opportunities are. And, in discussions that I was having internally about the way the services are provided, like we kind of started in terms of the specialty transit of having community care in Northumberland, right? Where there were only certain days, and then we looked to start supplementing that on the other days with our existing program. And then, we're in a position really where, we are and can, run for all of the hours that we're running for, but we're still contributing to community care in Northumberland. So I'm not the transit expert, but it does kind of identify potentially an opportunity there where we don't need to be, we're potentially, could have some savings in terms of the overall expenses for the municipality. So that's a different, that's a conversation for a different day, which is, coming up when we look at community grants in October. But wanted to, as we're building our steps towards the budget, just wanted to kind of, point that out, give opportunity for some thought around that, and as we continue to kind of look for opportunities, in terms of our expenses.
Thank you, Director. And Director Davis, did you want to weigh in on anything around the transportation part of this report before we ask away?
I'm sure. I'm happy to speak to rural transit. I suspect that there's going to be a number of questions generated in regards to that, so I'm happy to answer those questions as they come. I will say that I'm supportive of the Rural Roles program as we've brought it forward and piloted over the last 2 years. I would note that that pilot either needs to effectively come to an end at the end of this year, and be discontinued, or continue as a service that's provided by the municipality.
Thank you very much. Okay, turning the floor to questions and comments. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. When I saw this on the agenda for today, my immediate reaction was, I think this is opening up a Pandora's box that isn't quite as simple as just a on paper numbers change with small implication on people's taxes. Because it's not the first time that we've heard as a council that there are services either deemed special services or common services that residents feel are improperly categorized. And so my sense is that if we are going to do a special services review, we would probably want to do that in a more comprehensive way that at least takes a moment to consider some of those other budget lines that we are being asked by the community to consider against the criteria established in the Municipal Act. Fortunately, I think we don't necessarily have to get into that debate at this moment because, as Director Davis has pointed out, we are currently in a pilot for the extension of the special transit to the rural area. It's not something that we as a council have yet determined or committed will be a long-term service that we continue to provide. So it seems a little bit preemptive or cart before the horse, so to speak, to be changing how we classify that budget line as a common services if we haven't yet actually made a commitment for the continuation of that service long-term in the rural community.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Mink?
Thank you. So, yeah, when I read this report, a lot of questions were raised. So I had a few conversations. I looked back. I called Community Care actually today and had a conversation with them. I looked back at previous budgets and previous conversations, as well as the pilot program, and questioned all of this and why it's coming forward right now. I think that we are ahead of making any decision on this. I think we're ahead of receiving the Community Care report or a presentation from Community Care and truly understanding what services that they provide. What they told me today is that they offer services 5 days a week. And it's to work, to school, shopping, social activities, recreational activities, for anybody. Whereas our specialized service is to the urban area, which I want to stress that it's not exclusively in the rural area. They're coming here to shop, to go to services, to work, some of them. So it's, in my opinion, that is not a rural service only. We haven't surveyed patrons. There's no staff report at this point. It's way too early to say how we could potentially match the what community care offers, and this hasn't been referred at all to the accessibility committee as well. So I think that making this decision right now isn't the time for that. I think there's a lot that needs to be done before we make these decisions.
Thank you, Councillor Mink. Any other? Yes, Councillor Adam.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious on what the service is for the rolls. Like, how many people are actually using this? Do you know off the top of your head?
I can answer that question. Through the mayor to Councillor Pearson. So currently we have 4 registered participants that are regular users of the system. In that ward, we have 1 user that uses rural rolls every single week to get to a series of appointments.
I'm sorry, just to follow up. Maybe I missed it here. What is the annual cost of that? Do you know off the top of your head?
Through the director of finance, 152,000. 152,000.
I'm just going to jump in here and add to the transportation conversation. I know that it is a pilot project, and since the pilot started, of course, we have established a number of other flexible transportation options in the community, and that needs to also be part of some of the conversation on this moving forward through the deregulation of taxis. Councillor Mink, I thought you had a follow-up. Just changed your mind.
So
Councillor Mink's
I
back.
just,
Yeah.
so, well, I'll say that for myself, I would vote no for this tonight, but I just kind of want to know from the rest of council if there's any interest in making a deferral or a referral for any of those items that I had mentioned before we vote yes or no on this.
Councillor Mink, would you like to then put forward a motion on the table and have us see if we can get a seconder and have some discussion on it just to get the ball rolling?
Well, I think if the consensus is voting yes or no generally, then I'm not sure that putting motion on the table would be worth it. If it's going to be yes, go ahead, then this is a lot of extra work I'm asking for, or if it's no, it's a lot of extra work I'm asking for. So I just kind of would like to hear from the rest of council how they feel. Is it worth me putting a motion, or is the feelings yes or no?
Okay, let's hear from council members. We haven't heard from Councillor Todd. Do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I agree that I think there's more information than we need to have. We should finish the pilot on rural roles, and we should get some data. And then before we assign costs, we should know what we are assigning costs to.
Councillor Gerald, would you like to weigh in?
I would also agree that we need more information, more time to make a better decision.
Deputy Mayor.
This wouldn't need to be part of the wording of a motion, but in terms of additional information, I did ask for a copy of the report from 2017, which was the end result of a working group that met 18 times over 2 years to conduct the last special services review. I got a copy from Legislative Affairs, and it's been a really informative read just for me to understand the difference between, like, what is the bar for determining what is a special or common service. So I wondered if that might be circulated as well to council, because I think it would be, so we don't have what's the term, informational asymmetry as we go into this decision in the future.
Okay, so given that new piece of information and given where you were going, Director Baxter.
Yeah, I'd just like to clarify. So regardless of whether this is a pilot or not, arguably, if we had started this in the fall of a year, we wouldn't go back and change the tax allocation for this. But As soon as we were piloting this for a year, we should have adjusted the taxes for it. Just as if we were bringing a new program to the community and we were going to pilot for a year or two, someone still needs to pay for it, right? So, from an equity standpoint for our taxpayers, regardless of whether this is a pilot or not, right? We don't need to, if this program is stopping and we're not going to do community care in Northumberland, we're not going to do any assistive specialty accessible transit in the rural area come 2025, then the decision around specialty transit as a special service goes away, right? But, if we're going to continue a pilot, if we're going to continue with a third-party provider, we really should be thinking, regardless of who's doing it, that, we have one area of our community that is, solely paying for an accessible transit service. And then if we also have, however done, in the other half of our community, that shouldn't be paid for by the entire community, specifically not the group that's already paying exclusively for their own, right? It's an inequity, right? And so that's my job, is to point out how the legislation occurs and how it applies here. I have spent many years, I've been on all the committees, I've worked with the ministry, I've been approached as a subject matter expert in the province on this exact topic. So I'm happy to speak to people, to go through, but my job is to point out to you whether this is whether this is done by a third party, whether this is going to be done by our own services, however it is. If we're going to offer the service, right, then there also is a financial contribution for the cost of the service. And that's ultimately what this comes down to. And that's where I start to stop myself, because, I think, Vicki, you were here when we first started with Community Care Northumberland, and now you're, rightly a good supporter. I think it's a great program. It's now almost $10,000. It was less when it started, right? And we were going through the whole tax, allocation phasing program. And, and it started, less than, and it's a community grant, right? But it has changed and evolved over time, right? I've pointed out this issue, right, since before this council, was in place. So it's not a surprise, it's nothing new, but it's something that this council kind of identified that we were going to tackle once that allocation phasing was done. And we're also trying to do this so that we're not spending an entire budget day and then at the end of the day having this conversation, right? This is what the whole part of the budget roadmap is at. So I just want everyone to kind of be, aware. This is why we're talking about it now. It isn't anything new. And regardless of whether, we're going to offer it as part of our service or whether we're going to have like a duplicate or a similar whatever service, we still need to think about, the fairness and the equity and how we fit into the provincial framework of who pays. And just give me one more second. I go back to, okay, if we were back into the days of it just being $5,000 for Community Care Northumberland, and we're thinking, well, it's not that much money, like, does it really, how much, do we really treat that? I get that. But I also see what is now a very small program that occurs once a year on one day or week or whatever. And we, for whatever reason, are splitting that out, right? And I tried to point out in our report, everything else is in six figures. And then we have one program, right, that's like under $5,000. And does that make sense, right? And we think about the overall tax, part, it'd be nice to simplify, things down so it's easier for people to understand. And we're focusing on the bigger and the more important things. And you've asked lots about how does the community start to, come together a little bit, right? Some of these are opportunities, I think, to be able to do that.
Thank you, Director. So just to be clear, are you saying that we are currently not in line with provincial legislation when we are asking for Ward 1 to be paying for certain Ward 2 services, and the same would be the case if it was the other way around, that we are actually not adhering to provincial legislation?
Well, essentially, yes, right? If it is a service that's being provided, such as the current pilot, to the entire community, then it is through the province, it is a common service, right? So this has obviously evolved, right? This has just evolved over time, right? We're at the point now where we're, where we're looking to, make a decision and to address it more than we have in the past. But effectively, what is determined to be a special service is ultimately a decision of council. My main point, is that, we now have an inequity. Before, it was a service only run, like conventional. I'm not suggesting to you that the entire community pays for conventional, because the conventional bus doesn't leave the urban area, right? And so that's why we're not talking about that. In this case, we have one group of taxpayers that is paying for a specialized service, right? That is, and another group of taxpayers that aren't contributing at all to that service. And that same group of taxpayers, right, is getting the benefit of the program run by the Community Care Northumberland that all taxpayers, including the urban area, are paying for. But the part that we're paying for in addition, right, is focused on the rural area. So there is definitely an inequity.
Councillor Mink.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. So I feel a little bit, I want to say the wrong word, but when this pilot program came out, the question was asked, will this be an additional cost? Is there an additional cost? And no, that was the answer. And that was part of my decision making. When it came back again to council, that question was asked again. So I feel this coming up now is not really fair, because that question was asked. A question that so part of my concern is that the community care offers more service than our roles does. Our roles is very defined as to who can take that service. So part of my concern is the cost that's being told to us, $654 or $1654. I don't see a plan of how our staff right now could offer this same service. All the phone calls, like there's 250 patrons and 1,800 rides between Hamilton Township and Port Hope. That's the western route. So we're really kind of putting Hamilton Township and community care in a predicament at this point if we decide not to go forward with this, because they've got their year plan based on the partnership. So I just don't see how we have staff ready to take on potentially hundreds of patrons and routing when right now we're handling 4 people under our current system. The other thing that doesn't make sense to me is that we have around 1,100 rural homes right now. And if the community care is 9,500, when you do the math, our system being 1654 increase, it doesn't really add up. It sounds like they're getting less for a greater cost. So that's why I think we're a little ahead of ourselves here. I would like to see a comparison between the two systems, what's being offered, and what that tax increase would be under both models before we make any decisions.
Thank you, Councillor Mink. And I've got Councillor Todd, and then back to the Deputy Mayor.
Thanks very much. I just have a couple clarifying questions, Director, because I'm starting to get confused about the conversation, because I feel we've turned to a transit conversation, and I don't know if that was necessarily the intention of this report. So I'm curious whether or not what we are talking about is simply a process versus the application of the process, which is if we were to, like, are you asking us to consider, hey, this is how specialty services are meant to be doled out, whether it's transit or anything else. And we will make that determination at budget time, whether there will be a transit differentiator at that time, but that's not what we're doing today. And I'm genuinely asking, is that the space we're in, or are we in a different space? I just need my own clarification.
And thank you, Councillor Todd.
Certainly, I'm just going to back up, briefly. So when the pilot came forward, I believe the additional cost to service the rural area, right, at the time were negligible. It could be accommodated within the existing budget. There is a difference, though, right? We wouldn't charge the incremental cost of expanding that service, right? You now are sharing in the cost as a community, right? So while there was no increase in the budget, tax allocation and what the budget dollar in are two different topics, right? And I do know, because I had spoken to the director who was responsible for transit when the last report came forward in terms of the continuation of the pilot, that tax allocation, right, is very much a consideration. And that was included, in that report and has been throughout. To get to your question, Councillor Attridge, this really is a question about the way we're offering services right now, regardless of whether it's a pilot or not. As I say, this goes away if we're not going to run any accessible transit in the rural area come 2025, but that's not my purview. And we've been doing community care in Northumberland for many years. I think there was 1 year that we didn't, and this might go back to 2017 or something. It's been quite a while, right? And it's been increasing in the cost, which is what happens to services. And now we're now covering on both fronts. So as your person overseeing finance, who's responsible for tax allocation, and has a requirement to review and report to you every year per council's bylaw, that is why I'm here today to say, if we are going to offer accessible transit in the rural area, we currently have an inequity and we should be addressing that.
So we have the Deputy Mayor and then Councillor Adam.
I just want to, though, get back to sort of the context within that we're being asked to make this decision. So I appreciate Director Baxter, you're a subject matter expert. Problem is we're not yet, right? So we haven't, I think what we're saying is we haven't had enough information transfer from you as the subject matter expert to us to be able to confidently make a decision that we know is correct and right. And in the context of a community that is somewhat divided still, where to be honest, I don't hear taxpayers in Ward 1 complaining about the inequity and wanting to know if they're subsidizing Ward 2, but we do hear that regularly from some of our neighbors and constituents in Ward 2. And that is the context within we're having this conversation, right? It's part of that broader ongoing conversation that we have with the rural part of this community. And so I think I don't think it's unreasonable for us to ask that we have time to, deepen our understanding of how we differentiate between common and special services, and that we make sure that we're making a really thoughtful and informed decision, because our community is watching. There are people who feel already a little disenfranchised and concerned about inequity. And I think it's really important, given that understanding, that we are very clear and seen to be making a thoughtful decision that we can all feel really confident about, so that we can explain it and defend that decision with all residents after that decision's made.
Councillor Adam.
Thank you. So going back to the overall, I just need a clarification here. So if we change to common, and then we decide to remove the roles pilot, does Ward 2 still pay as common, even though they no longer have the service? And then also on top of that, the Christmas tree part, that's a Ward 1 only service. So wouldn't that be the same as the 9,500? It's a common, so we'd be putting a Ward 1 common into a general? Just curious for clarification.
Yeah, so the context of that, though, right, is that is a $3,000 service, right? And by comparison, right, police and conventional transit combined is $7 million. So it is, I guess there's a remaining question about why we're taking, one $3,000 part and allocating it out. If we are going to be at that level of, anyways, I don't think that's a space that we should be in from an equity standpoint. And we've effectively at this point, it's $3,000. So let's say we didn't have specialized transit in the rural area, our Port Hope Run 1. We have been spending 3 times the amount it costs for Christmas tree pickup to give to Community Care Northumberland, right, for many years. And that has just been treated as a common expense. So If we had 5 expenses, I don't care which area it pertains to, that were 3,000 and 5,000 and whatever, that would be one thing, right? I'm not here arguing to you that this is provided in the rural area or whatever. I'm just saying it is part of the inequity, which is why over my past few reports, if there's an equity, you can address it through a combination of Christmas tree, right? This small, low dollar, part that just adds a level of complexity to this whole tax allocation part. And so that's really the reason, right? How is that okay? And then, 3 times as much money, even if it's just Community Care Northumberland, right? Where the urban area is paying in duplicate, right?
And I'm completely okay with that. Really, that wasn't the big thing, the 3,000. It's so minor, no big deal. I'm just using it as a comparison because you were using
Absolutely.
the 9,000, which again is not a lot of money in comparison to what our overall budget is. That being said, $152,000 is actually quite significant. So if we do remove that pilot project, that's $152,000 then that would become a common instead of it being specific, which is a lot more than the 3,000. It actually is substantial. That's more where I'm going. If we do remove it, would that remain a common, or would we then have to come back to this to remove it to put it back into a Ward 1 only service?
Sorry, you lost me there through the.
Do you want to try to ask that again so that the director can answer your question and then?
Yeah, sorry. Okay. So the rolls is 152,000. Is that right?
Correct.
Total program.
Sorry. So maybe I confused myself with this. But if the rolls program is 152,000, and we are as a pilot, but we're taking the transit and considering putting that as a common, if we then decide to remove the pilot, let's say we decide not to continue on with it, then the transit would still be a common, or would that then go back to a special service to specifically to Ward 1? That's what I'm a little bit confused on. Does that make sense?
Right. So if it was only provided for, if the service is only provided in a specific area, then it would then fit back within the definition of special services, but it would still be a council decision, right? There is still another element of that though, right? So let's say we didn't have our own program, then you still do need to consider that we are still spending, that the urban area then would still be, paying for a specific program for accessible transit. But then the rural area, the cost for, a similar, may not be the same, but a similar program run by another party is being provided in the rural area, right? But not the urban area. And so why should I as one group, one tax base, be paying for an accessible transit program in my geographic area, and then also paying collectively as a group more than 2/3 of the cost to run a different, albeit different, so you would track the cost separately, accessible transit program in a different area, right? That's the inequity. At that point, we're at least talking under $10,000, right? But this is the type of thinking that we need to think about, right? As you represent, the fairness of our tax base.
I know Councillor Mink has a further question or comment, but did you want to? Okay, Councillor Mink.
Thank you. So, not going to talk about that, but going back to the Christmas tree conversation, it sounds to me as if what we're trying to do is eliminate as many different special services as possible, just down to the police. By moving to the rolls, we can just charge everybody for the same program, and we're eliminating that difference. But to me, being a rural resident and knowing who's out there, we're not offering the same service. Children can't take rolls to school. Adults cannot take rolls to go play cards at wherever. That's the difference. And if this is just to make things simple, we're complicating people's lives significantly. So that is why I understand it would look nice on the bill and it'd be easier to calculate, and we just, nice round number. But we're offering something entirely different, and we're stranding people. We're making them, they may not be able to live out there anymore. They may be in a dire situation because of this decision we're making. So that's where I'm at this point where, fine, if rural has to pay the $9,500 for community care and they still get everything that community care offers, that is a better value than going to the rolls program. And I don't think we're prepared right now. I can't see the two systems. I would like to see community care come in here and speak with us, tell us what they offer. If there's a gap, then we can ask them to fill that gap. And what does that take to fill the gap? Because we're assuming, we rolled out this pilot program, and I've now learned we didn't go back to community care. We didn't ask them, can you fill this gap? We just launched a pilot program. And that's our fault for doing that. But I think that we need, so the motion that I would put here at this point is defer this back to staff and direct staff to contact community care to come in here and provide a presentation, and to refer this to the accessibility committee as well.
So I think before we do that or consider that motion, I know that Director Davis wanted to make a comment in our CAO. So Director.
Just to respond to Councillor Mink related to conversations with community care, very much do we have conversations with community care related to the services that they offer and how we could complement one another in those service offerings. So I just take exception to the fact that you suggest that we are not have not had conversations with community care throughout this process. We have.
And sorry, I apologize for that. I got a different narrative today in my telephone conversation. So I think that would be why it's helpful if they were to come here and stand in front of all of these things.
I think the CAO wants to say something, and then I'll revert back to you, Director Baxter.
Mine's very minor while they're sorting that out, if I may.
Okay, while they're sorting out the
Just-
technology.
You may have just misspoke, but transit would still be considered a special service. Just conventional transit would still be a special service. So there'd be policing for both areas, conventional transit for the urban area only. It's just the minor Christmas tree and the specialty that we're talking about.
CAO.
Thank you. I'd like to thank everyone for the dialogue and communications this evening. I think it was really helpful to assist us in how we're going to move forward. From my chair, the takeaway is a couple of things. One, I think we have some work to do from an education and communication standpoint with council when it comes to shared service versus common service and what that looks like, how we landed here. Specifically with the reference to the 2017 process, that was a very comprehensive process versus what the annual review is that happens each year prior to budget that Director Baxter is trying to accomplish this evening as part of the budget roadmap. So, but here nor there, I do think there is an opportunity to take a step back. I don't think that we should be making a decision in regards to the service this evening. I definitely do not think we need to be making a decision when it comes to community care versus the rural roles program. We don't have the data here this evening. There's been conversations happening in silos amongst council members and internally amongst the staff. So talk about information asymmetry. It's abound. Obviously, that is happening this evening. So I think we need to just take a step back. We need to bring another evening. We will bring forward some information in regards to common and shared servicing. Try to lay some groundwork and some understanding, knowing we will never undo the past couple of decades and be able to create, I think, an overwhelming sense of calm and ease and confidence and trust that I think has been the concern of this community for many, many years. That said, the intent of this evening from a staffing perspective was part of the budget roadmap. And looking at it, we need to bring a transit report back Let's take a look at the rural roles versus community care, because these conversations are going like this and it's becoming too muddy. We need to separate them. You need to have the policy conversation separate from the service conversation. So let's separate them. From my chair, I'm fully supportive of deferring it without a lot of language and actions. I think if we could have some time to step back internally, have some discussions in regards to what that extra communication and training looks like and what the transit report looks like, I'd appreciate that very much.
Okay, thank you very much. So let's go back to the drawing table with a recommended, I guess what we're going to have to do is consider the motion that we have in front of us, or can we simply propose a different motion altogether?
So, Madam Mayor, currently a motion was on the floor that was that has not been seconded. It was from from Councillor Mink, and I was just typing furiously as you were speaking, Madam Councillor Mink, and what I wrote here was that report FS 1224 be referred back to staff to request that community care provide a presentation to council on the types of services they offer, and also refer the report to the Accessibility Advisory Committee for feedback. My understanding, just based on the discussion that was after that, was that the request from staff is that the report be deferred to a later date following a report from staff regarding transit service in the rural area. Is that accurate?
I think if we will include
Yeah.
presentation from them, and see it, and then we'll also provide additional training and comments.
Yeah, if we're deferring this back to staff, I think the accessibility committee part we could leave out at this stage, but I think it would be valuable to have community care come and give us a presentation on their services that they provide, just for information, even for the public. I think that is worthwhile going into budget, and then if we could just defer it back, the report back to staff with whatever wording.
I see Councillor Todd wants to weigh in on the potentially.
Just curious, would you be okay if those were two different matters? Like we could have the presentation on itself, but then staff can go ahead. Would that be okay?
Okay, so as I'm gathering the information, it sounds like the council is stating that we would. I haven't heard from everybody, but I'm hearing the narrative come out that we would appreciate a presentation from community care, but for the purposes of this motion, we'd like to make it a little bit more general in terms of deferring it back to staff for further consideration, education, awareness, and anything else that we need in order to make a decision about this moving forward. Are you amenable to having your original motion amended a bit, and we can get a seconder and get a vote on here?
Absolutely, whatever recommendation. Happy to hear.
Okay. Thank you to the clerk for deciphering all the thoughts.
Thank you for your patience, members of council. So here is what I have as the motion, and that would be that report FS 1224 be referred back to staff for additional information regarding special and common services. Okay, I can say that one more time. That report FS 1224 be referred back to staff for additional information regarding special and common services.
Are you comfortable with that as a mover?
Yes.
Okay. Seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Any further discussion, questions, comments? All in favor? That's passed unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to report 4.3, CO 0324, RE 2025-2028 Strategic Plan Roadmap. Staff have anything further that they would like to add to this before we vote on the recommended action?
Sorry about that. Thank you very much. So just a couple of quick items. So at our previous council meeting, we discussed the strategic new approach and new process to a new strategic plan. And during that staff report, there was the commitment made to detail a roadmap as to how we would actually land there and get to the end result. So we've taken a look and we've narrowed it down into what's going to happen each month to clearly define to council what the initiatives are going to be and how they're spelled out. Obviously, not every single detail about how every single focus group, all the questions of the surveys, et cetera, all details are in here. But I think a general roadmap, you'll have a general sense of exactly what the approach is going to be starting in October. So we're going to take a look at, council's going to be able to have an opportunity to determine vision statement, mission statement. If you would like to take a look at defined values, many municipalities have that in place. We're going to start the internal focus groups with managers. Right through to November, there'll be an internal staff survey released and continue with the internal focus group meetings. As you can see, they're spelled out there. Right through to December, when we'll be drafting public strategic plan survey and compiling all the results from the internal stakeholder engagement. In the new year, it'll continue with the release of the public survey. Again, you may be wondering why that is happening. We're consciously taking a look at the remainder of the year in the last quarter and what is happening and wanting to ensure that we don't have survey and engagement fatigue. We have the budget stuff going out right shortly in the next few days. So not wanting to overlap budget and strategic plan engagement, wanting to pull those apart and separate them to ensure that there is a conscious effort and the ability to speak to the community. It'll continue on in February, March, with an ultimate goal to do a full adoption in the month of April. You can see there what the end report or the end plan, we're hoping to what it will include. It does include matrix. We know we love that word. It does include matrix. So of course, that'll be included, as well as how the report is going to be reported on moving forward. So taking a look at how we're going to have touch-in points with council once the strategic plan is adopted. Are we going to look at it biannually, annually? So we'll be able to have a good conversation and meaningful conversation around that as well. Happy to take any questions now that it's been spelled out a little more clearly, or if you'd like to see anything added to it, by all means, open to any suggestions.
Thank you, CAO. I'm going to turn it over to colleagues for comments, questions. Deputy Mayor.
Refreshing. And I'm really pleased to see that it will be a robust process and likely to end with a document that we can all, support and really will influence our work together in a meaningful way.
And I just want to reiterate those comments. There were a number of us that were very concerned about the last strategic plan that we were considering, and this is a much more robust process, and I think will give us a much better guide and toolkit to be working with. So thank you very much for all the thought that went into this roadmap. So if there's no other questions or comments, I'm going to ask for a mover and seconder for the recommended motion. Moved by Councillor Mink, seconded by Councillor Adam. All in favor? That is passed unanimously. Moving on to Report 4.4, CS 1224, Re 2024 Municipal by-election debrief. Would staff have anything further that they would like to add before council considers this report?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do have a few things that I'd like to add. The report is fulsome. It's a fulsome overview of the 2024 by-election for the Ward 2 councillor position, and it also fulfills the municipality's legislative obligation to make public a report about the identification, removal, and prevention of accessibility barriers. I don't want to go into the details of the report, but I will say that this by-election was delivered in accordance with legislation. It was under budget, and it received no accessibility complaints. We used internal resources. We rearranged our work plan for 2024 significantly. And because of this, we were able to avoid hiring external staff, which was a major cost savings for the municipality. The report provides details of the full cost for the by-election in the financial consideration section. I'm happy to speak to that if you have any questions. And the report also provides an overview of our by-election activities, including community engagement and the communication efforts that we did this time around, as well as some potential areas for improvement for the 2026 election, for which we are going to start planning in less than a year. So it's coming up, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you for that. And I want to start by congratulating the staff for all of its work around the by-election, in particular our clerk, for navigating us through this election. And for the public record, can you please state the total cost of the by-election for the municipality of Port Hope?
So the total cost of the by-election was $21,000. However, we did achieve some cost savings through the monies that we did not pay to the council member that was no longer at the council table. So all things considered, the total cost for the by-election was approximately $6,300.
Thank you. Questions, comments from the table? Yes, Councillor Adam.
Thank you. So I want to thank you for this report. It's wonderful. A lot of really good metrics for Todd to go through there. I did want I love the fact that you did go through there, as well as putting in the cost savings of the councillor that was not at the seat at the time. So the $6,300 is wonderful, and I bet you that's news that a lot of the Port Hope residents really appreciate to have. I also noted that right underneath that, and just for anybody that didn't actually read the entire report in the public, obviously everybody here did, but in 2014 the election cost was $124,000. In 2018 the election cost was $99,000, so a reduction of about $25,000. And then in the 2022 election it was only $52,000. That is incredible, the savings that you have done year or election after election for the municipality, and we thank you so much for all that hard work. So thank you.
It wasn't me. I wasn't here, but but I will take the gratitude. I will take the gratitude, and I will say that a majority of those savings are, in all honesty, due to staffing, because staffing is usually the largest cost for any election, and in this case, we were able to achieve a lot of those savings due to the internet and telephone voting that we adopted.
Councillor Mink.
Again, thank you very much, and to the whole team for all the work that you did. So the report, I think, was fantastic too, with all the metrics. Do you feel that your team has also taken this time as a learning opportunity that you can apply to the upcoming election? So having that value add in addition to what you did.
Thank you for that question, Councillor Meng. And every election is an adventure. And I will say that this was one that was like that as well. We have definitely learned a lot of things through this by-election. One of the things that I think was different about this by-election, and we were one of the very few municipalities, I think one of maybe 4 or 5 municipalities in Ontario that had the opportunity to use a voters list from Elections Ontario. It was the first time that we had the opportunity to do that. So that was a learning opportunity, and we've had many dialogues with Elections Ontario following that, and it's been something that we will be taking and using as we move forward for the 2026 election. That and many other things, including community engagement. Responding to some of the different creative ways to educate the public on electoral activities now that we don't have a newspaper anymore. So there was a lot of things that we did take away and that we're going to be using for the 2026 election.
Yes, Councillor.
Sorry, one more question. This has to do with funds. So during this process, there's a lot of public debate over the money that would be spent. Is there, I don't know if this makes any difference, but is there if we were to collect annually, knowing we're going to have an election every 4 years, and this might be a question for our Director of Finance, if we were to collect funds distributed annually over 4 years, that we could then, if there's no by-election, then we've got our funds collected. But if there is a by-election, we know we kind of have a reserve in holding. Is that something that would be of value or not?
I'll take a crack at this one for now. That is a practice we used to employ. As we've brought the costs down substantially, we haven't needed to do that. I think about 2017, 2018, we made a decision to stop contributing annually to the reserve. We used to contribute upwards of $25,000 plus each budget year. In our ability to sort of scale back some of the costs and achieve some additional costs through internet and telephone voting only, the decision was made to stop contributing annually and absorb the costs within the election year. We expect sort of the election costs in the municipality of Port Hope to sort of have plateaued or maybe slightly decrease. Given that consideration, I don't think there would be a great deal of benefit to annually contribute to what on the total budget is a smaller project.
Thank you for that. And I would certainly say that this council has made many other decisions that have cost a lot more than $6,000. And this was at least in the name of democracy. So thank you again. The recommended motion is on the table. Can I get a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Adam, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. All in favor? Thank you. That is passed unanimously. And moving on to report 4.5, DS 2020-24, re ZB06 2024 zoning bylaw amendment application 5868 County Road 65, Osaka. Is there anything that the staff would like to add before the council considers the report?
Thank you. Through the mayor, the report provided this is a zoning bylaw amendment that is a condition of a consent that was passed in July. And if anybody has any questions, the report was quite fulsome. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you for that. Any questions or comments around the table for this? Seeing none, the recommended, the Deputy Mayor.
Sorry, I feel like I'm a broken record because I think I say this every time we're looking at a severance of this nature. I say I can't, I appreciate that it's compliant with all the policies from the relevant levels of government, including our own official plan, but I can't help but voicing concern of the overall implication of our continuing to sever farmland and residences from farmland and what the implications that will have on the future of family farming in our community. And I continue to look forward to an opportunity to get into that in discussions around our future official plan.
Any other comments? Yes, Daryl. Councillor Daryl.
I guess the comment I have is knowing the property with the barn and everything located on the property, and to the last to my knowledge, 3 horses on the property, is Res V1 an appropriate designation for it?
Through the mayor, it's so as this property is in Osaka, the township, it's the current owner that is there right now. It will be a hamlet residential, so there will be no, and it's going down to 0.33 hectares. Like it's actually quite small compared to right now. It's the big the whole parcel, right? In the Res V1 hamlet residential, there'll be no livestock permitted. I hope does that answer your question? Okay.
Thank you. So the recommended motion is on the table. Can I get a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Adam, seconded by Councillor Todd. All in favor? Thank you, and that's passed unanimously. At this point, we're going to take a 2-minute break. We've been at this for an hour and a half, so we're going to take a very quick 2-minute break to allow people to use the facilities, and we'll come back and wrap up the meeting. Thank you. Okay, we're going to reconvene. So moving on to item number 5, notice of motions. There are currently no notices of motion on the agenda tonight. Moving on to item number 6, updates and new business. There are a few updates that I will share. One is that such wonderful news for the community. Loyalist College is having its grand opening September 19th at 10 Pine Street at 1:45 p.m. The public is welcome. This is really a momentous occasion for our community. The second update that I'd like to share is that the First Fall Mayor's Youth Advisory is going to be meeting on the 18th at Town Recreation Center at 5:30 p.m. And I had occasion to go and meet with the incoming class of Port Hope High School last week, and trying to recruit new faces and new youth to that group. And we'll be trying to disseminate that widely to get more of a robust group happening for this year. The third update is the West Northumberland Physicians Recruitment Committee that I sit on about a month ago had asked me to chair the development of a strategic plan for physician recruitment, and I have developed a draft strategic plan that's going to also incorporate some of the findings that came out of the Northumberland Hills Hospital consultation process with TMU University. And hopefully that will create a blueprint for action that will allow better success in recruiting of physicians to the area, and the county will be considering some of those actions at the next council meeting. The third update I have to share is we've been asked around some of the police trends and crime rates that we're seeing in our community for this year. So starting at the beginning of January right through to yesterday, I have some data that I'd like to share. We're not really trending in a good direction. I want to just start by saying that, but I'm going to share with you some of the increases. One is sexual assaults are up by 80% in our community. Arson and fire has increased by 10%, assaults 83%, family disputes 56%, fraud 36%, bail violations 7%, warrants 7.9%. So those are the trends that have occurred since January of this year. The data that I've received from the Port Hope Police Services. I'll have additional data from the OPP to share at a later date, but those are some crime statistics and updates that I wanted to share. A couple of other updates. One is that we've been meeting with, or I've had the opportunity to meet with a number of faith community leaders, including Shane Watson and Kevin Moore, to talk about putting together a community-driven list of housing options for seniors in our community. And so this will be very much the model that was used for bringing Ukrainian families into Port Hope. So we'd have host families opening their homes to seniors, and there would be a process overseen by one of the faith communities to make that happen. It's still in early days, but we are putting the word out to the public. If you are such a person who has extra space or accommodation in their home that would be interested in housing a senior person, there's going to be a process, an application. There'll be very careful matching. There'll be legal protections on both sides. But if you are interested, please do contact Reverend Kevin Moore at the United Church and Shane Watson as well, and we can provide all of the email and contact information for that. But it's early days, but I know that the group is going to be moving very, very quickly on that. And just a final update in terms of business. There is ongoing discussion. Oh, was that a wave from the clerk? No, that was okay. I never know if you're signaling me. There's been ongoing work and discussions with Minister Tabolo in the county on really trying to bolster some of the funds that were set aside at the county budget last year for treatment for complex mental health and addictions in our community. When I say our community, I'm talking about Northumberland as a county, and I've been working quite diligently on this file over the last year, and it looks like we're in a point of applying for some additional funding from the provincial government to expand on the programming that will be available to the constituents of the county, including folks in Port Hope, and that will also be accompanied by new monies for supportive housing. So that's also good news in terms of creating a more supportive ecosystem for a range of our population that are suffering from a complexity of mental health and substance use issues. So stay tuned for that. And the final thing that I thought that I would take the opportunity to speak to this evening is been thinking a lot about civics and public understanding of the sort of the roles and responsibilities of CAOs and councillors in the municipality. So today I'm going to talk about the role and responsibilities of our CAO. So what you may not know is the CAO is the one employee of the council, this council here around the table. But the CAO has pretty enormous responsibility for financial management, executive support to the council, service delivery options. And so when you think about what makes a great CAO, they have to be perceptive, they have to be flexible, resilient, and to adapt to the demands of this office. And more importantly, they get to hear from each one of us. And I don't think we all come in and say, wonderful, everything's great, but instead we have a long list of needs, asks, and complaints. And I just want to acknowledge that when our CAO, our newest CAO, started last fall, she really walked into a municipality that had numerous significant files to go through. And for all of you here, you may be familiar with maybe one or two because those things are near and dear to your heart. But if we look at the grocery list, from the cleanup to Walton Street to File Factory, the fire and file factory, all the different OLTs, the reorganization of the staff and organization, the plan for the strategic plan, the salmon fishing, and on top of that, and that's just the tip of the iceberg, the day-to-day challenges and operations. It is a tough job. So when I was asked last year what I thought was one of the best decisions that this council made, it was to pick the CAO that we have. It is not an easy job. And I also thought today, as we think about how to grow the respect between the CAO and the council to make sure that everything continues to run smoothly, that we focus on decisions that are made for the good of all, that we can show appreciation for our CAO. We are not very accustomed in local politics to express positive emotions. So tonight I'm going to ask each member of our council to exercise their heartfelt appreciation muscle for the CAO and share some words of appreciation. So I'm going to start with Councillor Todd.
Well, thank you, and I would happily do that. I know. I'm waiting for her to look up. Yeah, I think you said it beautifully, and you know, Candace, of course, couldn't speak highly enough of the value that you bring not only to this organization, but I know personally you've talked me off the ledge many times, so I appreciate that as well, and I'm very grateful to have you here.
Deputy Mayor.
I think if in a moment of maybe self-awareness, I can admit I sometimes am raising issues from a perspective that may be new to a lot of people or different from some of the angles that we use to look at issues conventionally, to say. And one of the things I think I most appreciate is that when I'm coming to you with things that you haven't seen before or ideas that are new to you, you listen and you take the time to read materials that I send you and you take me seriously. And I think that's, I think best expressed as being a stark contrast from the first part of my term on council. And so I think it's, again, like I think I used the breath of fresh air or refreshing earlier in regards to the report on the strategic plan. But, I can't imagine we're always going to agree, but I always know that you're going to consider and listen and learn where I'm coming from. So thank you for that.
And I'm going to speak for Les, who is Councillor Les, who's not with us this evening, but he did send me some words. Our CAO Candace is smart, very personable, friendly, and tough. She is forthright, an extremely attentive listener, and generally a very nice person. Councillor Mick.
Yeah. So for me, during the process of selecting a new CAO, it was very important to me to again represent my rural community. So there was very specific things that I was looking for, and through that process, you gave me that confidence that where you're coming from and you can apply that here in this community, and you have demonstrated that. And I think that some of these big items here they're big items that are focused. It's just coincidence that they're here in the urban area, and I am very happy to hear with the strategic plan your thoughts of going out there yourself and speaking with our community out there. I did sort of convey that, and the people that I spoke to, it was just kind of this might happen. We're very happy to hear that. The feedback that I got was great. I heard her speak once, or I did have a small conversation, and they're looking forward to that. And I think that says a lot because you haven't had those conversations intimately with them yet. So just that little bit gives them that confidence too. So I'm very happy with my choice and that you are here. So thank you for everything that you do.
Councillor Adam.
Thank you. So I have nothing good to say about our CAO. I'll get into that. So I speak to a lot of staff with the municipality, and overwhelmingly, they tell me that you are great at decision making. We here constantly see how great you are at decision making and how fantastic you are dealing with our personalities, because that is not an easy task. I've also seen it from many, many residents, how wonderful you are with the customer service aspect. And that is probably the most difficult thing, as we have a lot of residents that have different opinions, and it is not easy. As somebody who's in a service industry, it is not easy for that. And then there was today. So today we had a one-on-one, and we're going through things, but as Adam does, I do things a little bit different. So I brought in a box of undecorated cupcakes, and then I also brought in a piping bag full of icing. So let me show you what our CAO did on her very first time piping cupcakes, and then we distribute them out to everybody here for everybody to indulge in. That was wonderful. So when I say I have nothing good to say about our CAO, I mean that good is not the word that is needed, as you are incredible and fantastic, and we appreciate you. Thank you.
And finally, Council Darrell.
I haven't known you very long as these guys. But from when I first started, I think I've talked to you, I think at 7:45 in the morning and long after 5 o'clock before. So that speaks volumes to your work ethic and dedication to how this town operates. And I don't think we could ask for a better CAO right now. Thanks.
Oh, gosh. Finally. Thank you to everybody, and yes, to our CAO. We appreciate you. We value you, and from my seat, definitely the right person at the right time for this municipality. And I can also speak to the incredible work ethic I speak to you at 6 a.m., I speak to you at 10 p.m., I speak to you on weekends, and I know your dedication to this community and to this organization, and we are very lucky. I think you're probably one of the best CAOs in the province, so we're lucky, and we look forward to continuing to move on through all of these files, and we'll continue to be coming to you with the asks and the needs and the complaints. Okay, moving on to other updates from other council members. Yes, Councillor Todd.
Wonderful, thanks. I have a very quick one. It was announced this week to the HPIA that TJ Kalina has issued a resignation. So I wanted to just say thank you to her. She has served very, very well. If you do not know TJ, she owns G Facey downtown. So you can pop in and say hi. This was actually her third time in 32 years working with the board and the HPIA. I have the feeling we will see a fourth round from TJ because she's very dedicated to this community. And I also want to just mention that when it was hard for her to step down, but she noted that she will be very involved as things go on. So I just want to take the time to thank her for all the work that she's done.
Councillor Adam.
Thank you. So I just want to remind everybody what's happening this weekend. Most people probably realize that the fall fair is going on this weekend, and it is going to be a fun weekend. So so make sure you get out there. Obviously, Saturday is a highlight for many Port Hope residents. Get onto that hill and have a lot of fun there watching the Demolition Derby. That being said, it's not the only great thing that's going on in the municipality this weekend, as it is also the Port Hope Panthers season opening. So Friday night is the Port Hope Panthers season opening, and it'd be awesome if after you went to the fair, you get over to the Jack, you pack the Jack, and you watch a wonderful game of hockey there. Now I'm just going to give a quick little update of a couple of the things that I did this weekend. The Run Salmon Run and the Fête en Rose, the pink party that Sean Carthew put on was fantastic, and it was great for the entire community. All I saw were happy faces, everybody laughing, having a good time. So that was really nice to see. And kudos to Sean Carthew. He does a wonderful job putting on these events. Also on Saturday night, I had a wonderful experience with our Port Hope Police. So I had the opportunity to do a ride program with the Port Hope Police, and I rode around with Sergeant Matt Lawrence. It was a fantastic eye-opener on the difficulties that the Port Hope Police have day in and day out with what they have to deal with. And I can't really get into any of the details of what we went through for obvious reasons, but they are a hard-working group, and we are so fortunate to have them in our community. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Adam. And just on the point of the ride with the police, that is an open opportunity for any member of council or any member of the police services board. Deputy Mayor.
I was looking over at my colleague Daryl to see if he was going to make the update, but in case you were really excited about all of the tax policy discussion today and you want to continue to ask questions and deepen your understanding of property taxes, please join. This is Councillor Darrell's instigation to organize a meeting at the Canton Hub that's open to all members of the public on Thursday evening between 7 and 9 p.m. And I'm very pleased to have been asked to join him in that. And I look forward to speaking with anyone who's interested in coming and talking more about taxes.
At the very least, there'll be refreshments.
Thank you very much for all of those updates. So now we move on to item number 7, question period. It's now time for question period. Remember, the purpose of question period is to make inquiries of council related to matters of municipal business. This is not meant to be an avenue to ask questions to staff. If you do have a question that's operational in nature, we will pass it on to the appropriate staff person. And we ask that when you come up to the microphone, that you please identify your name and address and where you live in which municipality, and make sure that the purple button is pushed.
I'm loud, so hopefully it's not too loud. I have a little bit of the thing that I want to say first.
Sure, but before you do, you'll have to identify who you
Oh, sorry.
are, your address,
nervous, so
and where you live.
My name's Jason White. I live at 525 Loomis Road in Codrington, Northumberland County, but I'm also a property owner in Port Hope. First and foremost, I'd like to extend my apologies to the mayor on behalf of myself and fishermen that I speak to on a regular basis. Although this topic and situation has become frustrating for both sides, there is no room for this debate for threats, vulgarity, or harassment. This behavior is not acceptable. For what you said last week, I was disheartened over that, about the email that you got. So going forward, on July the 9th, Council had an in-camera meeting on topic of the Ganaraska River, and this meeting, there was no public information given. On July the 27th, there was a media release saying that Council received confidential information from the Ministry of Natural Resources. I have an NRC from Freedom of Information that there was no confidential information supplied to the town of Port Hope. Supplied to the town council. So I was wondering if we could get some of the information from that meeting as to how we ended up. I'm neither here nor there for the river closure, but I just want to know how we got there. How it ended up going to seek an injunction to have it closed early, when there was a bunch of meetings that Claire held, and none of our options were brought to the table or submitted or anything. And we spent hours on that, loss of income, to help better the river, and in our opinions, to try, and it was never ever brought forward. So I was just wondering if we could get some information from that in-council meeting, as much as we can, to find out how it ended up, the council voting for the mayor to go forward for an injunction.
Well, first of all, thank you for being here, Mr. White, and thank you for your comments at the beginning. And just to clarify that what I read out last week was but one example amongst many. So just to clarify that. In terms of your other question, you know that we cannot share with you the discussions in closed meetings. The details of those discussions, they are closed for that purpose. But if you have information contrary to what we have reported publicly, we will take that to the staff and we will answer your inquiry by the staff once we have an opportunity to
So
do
there's no way possible that the motion that was voted on, like the motion to move forward with an injunction and other, it just says there was resolution for an injunction and other possibilities. So we cannot get how that was worded.
Closed meeting sessions are for that reason closed meeting sessions, and I can't speak to the content of that closed meeting session. But if there's anything that our CA would like to comment on that, I'm going to.
So I can state unequivocally that there was information given from the ministry why we went into closed session to discuss it. So there was the reason and the intent as to why we entered into closed session is valid. Once we enter into closed session, the motion, the wording of the discussion, how the vote took place, it all remains protected under the Municipal Act, and we are not allowed to divulge that on any topic. But one other to clarify though, I do want to just take a step back outside of the closed session procedure, to thank your group for all of the work that you've done. And I do know that the director of Parks and Rec, that information was supplied to her. It was actually brought forward into the public, into a council meeting, and it was taken forward to the formal salmon working group and provided to the ministry. So it did get communicated up through the channels. So it was discussed at a salmon working group meeting. Now, what fundamentally happened, I know that that information was discussed at a formal meeting. I can state that. I was told that. Sure, absolutely. Would more, yeah, with absolutely, and perhaps maybe just setting a meeting with Director Snook and I to sit down and have a chat about the actual details of what happened in public spaces, not inside the closed session, but out in public spaces, and she can sit down and clarify. I never sat in on any of the salmon working group meetings, but my understanding was some of those recommendations were discussed at that group, but she will be able to clarify and provide further details. So we can arrange that, and I'd be happy to sit in.
And Deputy Mayor.
Buttons are being finicky. I have a couple of things I'd like to share, some of which you and I have discussed already, just so everyone's aware, but I think it's important to state publicly as well. I think part of what has prompted the question about the release of the full motion as passed by council in that closed meeting was that an excerpt from that motion was shared publicly in a public release by the municipality. I did note that, and I did make inquiries with the clerk as to on what basis that excerpt was selected and why was that excerpt shared publicly. And I did ask whether the excerpt from the motion, so the direction being provided to the mayor, was, part of a motion that had more words to it. And I asked whether that had essentially lifted the lid, that we were then able to speak to the wording of that motion, but I was told unequivocally that I could not, and that I need to tread carefully, because it would be walking, close. It's close to the line. But I think that that's important to note, and I've certainly reflected on that, and that might be something for us to collectively reflect on. When there is information shared from a closed meeting. That was surprising to me because it went beyond what we normally share in a Rise and Report after a closed session. The other thing I did want to share, and I think perhaps for us to take as a bit of a learning point, is I think I appreciate the feedback from the CAO. I think that's really important, and it's important to know that yes, the report was shared. It was, I think, shared as correspondence. It was elevated to the agenda. It was made publicly accessible. The director did receive it and review it, and I understand it was discussed at the working group. But I think when it comes to people feeling like they are meaningfully participating in decision making, it's important for that to take place, but also for people to be able to see that it has taken place. And so when we have a situation where staff reports come forward, I think maybe an attempt to provide more direct and clear comment on how the recommendations have been informed by community consultation would be of note, as opposed to it being sort of rolled into the recommendations. If you see what I mean, had the report said, based partly on the input from the community roundtable, we're going to look at X, Y, or Z, it may have helped you and others who had contributed your time to see the evidence that what you had done was not a waste of your time, right? So that's something I think maybe we can reflect on for future.
Sorry, Mr. White, I'm just going to turn it over to the CAO because she wants to comment.
Just wanted to circle back, and the ministry is ultimately responsible for the regulations. So they took a look at a variety of regulations, and all of that is underway. And there was a lot of community initiatives that were brought forward outside of the formal regulation that is currently underway and was exceptionally valuable and is currently being implemented. So thank you very much for that.
I understand that aspect of it, but one of my other questions is, so from July the 9th to August the 27th, so from July the 9th to the 27th of August, there was nothing mentioned about, forgive me for the wording, council having the mayor seek an injunction or other plans, but it came out in July. If this was known on the 27th and you could release it on the 27th of August, why could that not have been released earlier so that people for or against could have a say? Because as soon as this came out, I would imagine there was a lot of phone calls to the town of Port Hope saying, do we cancel our vacation? Do we come to Port Hope? Like, are we going to be able to fish here? This could have been a little bit easier done.
Thank you for that question. And again, just to reiterate what the CAO said, the decision and the timing of the decision was the decision of the province. So maybe that's a question that you can also ask of the province. And I think there's an offer from the CAO for a sit down and a follow-up discussion with you. Hello.
Hello, I'm Martha from 79 Elgin Street South here in Port Hope, Ward 1. And I was just wondering if there was an update on the progress on the Children's Youth Wellness Hub.
Thank you, and thank you for coming to ask the question, and circling back, thank you for volunteering when the official announcement was made. Yes, there are some very exciting announcements. The first thing I should just back out and say is that Rebound is still the lead organization on the Youth Wellness Hub. Rebound had a number of staff changes over the summer, including a change in the executive director. The new executive director has now started, which is terrific news. So that part of it is absolutely back on track. The team is continuing to meet with the Ontario Youth Wellness Hub's implementation team, going through all the steps that are supposed to be happening. In the last month, a project manager has been hired for the hub, a care coordinator has been hired for the hub, an RFP is going to be going out in the next very short while to undertake the initial renovations that have to happen in the space. And there's a lineup of folks that want to get involved and volunteer in some way with, as we call, time treasure or talent. And as I understand it, they're just looking for somebody that might take the coordination of that on through the RFP process. The fundraising committee continues to work. I know that there's some success in attracting some additional monies. There's been initial discussions between the Youth Wellness Hub and the walk-in clinic of sharing of some health professionals to maximize, say, part-time positions into FTE positions. And the Youth Advisory Committee is going to be struck this fall. Rebound is going to be taking the leadership on that, as will the parental advisory and steering committee. So all that, the terms of reference are going to be announced. And the hope is that there will be some programming and services that start in very short order, even if they're not physically in the space, but in the community, that there will be at least one or two more events for youth, and that the full-fledged operations will begin in the new year.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the question.
Hi, Ed White, Mill Street. You got ahead of me with the police reports because my question was going to be on the police reports today. So something leaked out there. But in addition to what you brought forward, what I'm looking at from police reports would be how many break-ins were on Yonge Street, or is there an issue with a certain neighborhood and vandalism? How do we protect ourselves? Should I get a camera for my shop? I hear the reports on the radio from Coburg, and they break it down to, as you said, they had the incidents of assaults and different things like that. But they also talk about break-ins to cars, so that people know in their own neighborhoods or in the rural area, if somebody's stealing construction machines or something like that. Saying crime is up 70% kind of doesn't really help when we don't know. So I'm just wondering, my question would be, can we somehow get the police to issue a little bit more detailed things on what crime is going on, where it's happening, and what kinds of things? Because they're always saying, oh, you got to protect yourself. Well, let's give us some information.
Yeah, thank you for that question. In fact, the police does publish regularly press releases with quite detailed information. Those are always then put onto the Port Hope Police Services website.
I see they just got it back up and running
yeah,
again.
and Facebook page, etc. So anything that gets reported by the police also gets reported there. So you can get all of the information and all of the details about each incident. And if you have some concerns about the detail that is either there or not there, then that's a question to come to the Police Services Board meeting, and you can come and ask the questions directly to the board and make that request.
Are they? I didn't know they were open to the public.
They are open to the public.
Oh, okay. Could I ask another question? Okay, this is one of the things when I say it's interesting when each person gives information and whatnot, and how it's hard to put a question beforehand. This is one that came up with Mr. Baxter's report. It says, talking about the budget, it's going back to staff for more information on the special needs things, like this, the special, special services. Okay, it's going back to staff for more information. My question is, where is staff going to get that information? Like, are they going to have public consultations? Are they, are they going to talk amongst themselves? Like, where is the additional information that you guys want? Where is it going to come from?
Thank you for that question, Ed, and we will ask the staff and we will revert back to you on an answer on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions from the public this evening?
Good evening. Excuse me. My name is William Freeland. I currently reside on Shelter Valley Road. As Mr. White was talking about, he was mentioning about anglers coming to Port Hope. I am one of those anglers. And I have just basically two questions that I was considering on asking, and here I am today. And one of those questions is, when the decision to turn the section of river between Jocelyn Street and the southern limit of the CN Bridge into a sanctuary zone, was it at all possibly considered it could be turned into a permit-only section of river, like what they have done in several rivers in British Columbia and New Brunswick as well?
Thank you for that question, and that's a question that should be directed to the ministry that made the decision.
Okay, perfect. All right, and then that will be it for me, because my other question is going to be obviously voiced to the ministry as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for coming, and thank you for asking the question. Any other questions from the audience this evening? Okay. Yes, Councillor Adam.
Thank you. I am so sorry I missed this on the updates, and I shouldn't have. There is also something else that is extremely important, not just to Port Hope, but all of Canada. As this weekend on Sunday, it is our Terry Fox Run. So I can't believe that it slipped my mind, but the Terry Fox Run, and that'll be Sunday. I believe it's at 9 a.m. is the start time. So get your running shoes on.
We'll be looking for you, Councillor Adam. Okay, it is, this concludes our business to be covered on today's agenda, and I'm in a position to adjourn the meeting of the Committee of the Whole this evening, and the time of our adjournment is 8:44 p.m. Thank you to everyone.